Welcome to Ask Dr. Change. I'm Dr. Linda Ackerman Anderson. I'm happy to have you join me today to explore how to seriously up-level your leadership and consulting to transformational changes, all through conscious change leadership. Welcome to this episode of the Change Leaders Roadmap Methodology series. Today we're focusing on Phase 6, which is in many ways a continuation of the work that you've done in Phase 5, where you're analyzing the impact. Phase 6 is about planning and organizing for implementation. So all the work that we've done, and we're about to do more, then will be put into compiling your implementation master plan. What's most important to us is that we really strongly advise having one integrated project plan. Not a separate one for the project and a separate one for change management. For us, it's one integrated plan. So we're accomplishing the work of the content work of changing what about the organization has to be different, but we're doing it in a way that people's mindsets, behavior, and the cultural norms are also being attended to as the change is taking place. So for us, the human and content pieces are integrated into one plan. The first activity, there are two activities in this phase. The first activity is to develop that implementation master plan. So here at a high level, then I'll go into the tasks, we're resolving the impacts that you've generated in Phase 5. We're figuring out what actions are required to resolve those and figure out how to implement those actions. We're also organizing them. We've prioritized them. We're sequencing them. We're pacing them, and then ultimately being able to put them into an implementation master plan format. And then, of course, we communicated. So let me go through the tasks, and I'll continue the process from Phase 5, where we ended up with a long list of impacts and questions, and we grouped them. We addressed the magnitude of them, and we've prioritized them. So we take that good work, that good thinking, into now resolving them. So the first task of this activity always is design the process to develop your implementation master plan. That will be a reflection of the next several tasks that I go over. So who's going to actually put this into one integrated plan of the content and the people aspects of your process? And so who's going to do it, and what format will they use? What are, standards for good implementation planning? Who's going to do what? What are they going to do? The timing of things, start and stop, the sequence of things, who's involved, etc. So a format and a template is created, and also the identification of who's going to take all of this information in the most streamlined fashion and put it together into your implementation master plan. So you're designing the process consciously first. The next task is identify impact solutions and action plans. The deliverable there, solutions for the individual and interdependent impact issues have been identified, and action plans for their resolution created. And action plans include requirements to change the organization as well as the culture and people. So here, the problem-solving resolution processes will typically work. Once we have created the groupings, we assign the groupings to individual group leaders to ensure that someone is looking after each group of impacts. Those group leaders in their resolutions look for how can we integrate, how can we accelerate the work of figuring out resolutions. So the impact group leaders get together and talk about further integration and ways of acceleration. And then those that can be integrated because they're interdependent then go into a resolution process. The resolution process identifies what's the outcome we need from this impact, like how many people are going to lose their job, or how many people do we need to hire with this level of skills. Those would be classic impacts that we come up with resolutions and action plans for. And so every impact and every impact grouping is resolved and translated into actions. And those actions, ideally, we know we have people to execute on those actions. So we're coming up with a wealth of actions required that ultimately, when we go further, will need to be put into the implementation master plan. So resolutions are identified, action plans identified. The next task is the integration of those solutions and action plans. So we're looking across all of the impacts and their solutions of the impacts and coming up with the interdependencies and how we can integrate. How can we do more than 1, 2, 3, or 5 of them at the same time to accelerate things and incorporate actions? One example I have of this that is so important and how this task came to be identified in one major transformation, again, in the telephone operating transformation, we had 5 states involved in the work that was being done in impacts. And one of the leaders got up and said, I need to let go of 50 people with these skills as an impact. And I'm figuring out the process of doing that. The next leader got up and said, I need 35 people with those skills to fulfill what I need in my group. Had those 2 leaders not shared that information with each other and done their individual impact resolutions independently, they never would have looked at the requirement, the integration of one letting 50 go, one needing 35. And so they got together to figure out the best plan to optimize the use of pre-existing employees with the right skills. So that generated this particular task, integration of action plans and solutions. So that's work that the group leaders of your impacts get together and do that work collectively. It's a communication and a working session. It also helps identify what might still be missing that we haven't thought of in our impacts that will give us further requirements for planning, how to resolve and come up with actions, all prior to coming up with the final implementation master plan. The next task here has to do with transformations or change efforts that take a long period of time, because we often see them drifting, losing energy, not happening, not being mobilized. And so this task is design strategies to sustain the energy for change. So are there periodic recommitment meetings? Are there periodic communications? Is there a reboot to engagement of where we are in the process? Is there a relook at the design of the solution for where we are in implementation? Any of these strategies, again, from a mindset, behavior, culture standpoint, as well as ensuring we've got the right content solution. And so periodically, we're looking at how do we keep the energy alive for keeping this work going. Now, capacity is a major issue there. If people are tired of change fatigue, how do we keep them uplifted, involved, engaged in continuing the process towards the full adoption of the solution? So that's another task prior to the implementation master plan being finalized. And then ultimately, we look at all of that work that we've just identified and people with the perspective on what's also happening in the organization will then determine resources, pacing strategy, and timeline. So now is the time when we can get accurate about how long this will take and what level of resources are required for it. Really critical, based upon the realistic work of how much actual time and energy is required to get this new state into place. Where we did an estimate of timeline and budget in your change strategy work all the way back in phase 1, now the rubber meets the road. Now we have real data and we can accurately predict, forecast the pacing, how fast it can go, the sequencing, what has to happen first, the resourcing, budget, and other resources required, and the timeline. Now is where we get consciously truthful, realistic, humanly possible to execute on the project. Inevitably, that triggers an adjustment in expectations on budget and timing. And so hopefully we've created the expectation for course correction early on, especially if it's transformational, and that work then is executed here. Only then can we then compile. The last task of this activity is to compile the implementation master plan. So we're putting in place the sequence of actions, the people involved in them, how much time each will take, what impacts other actions as we proceed. And so we put together that implementation master plan here. And then ultimately those that need to understand it are communicated and engaged with it. We let the organization know what we're actually doing to get the project implemented. So a lot of work from phase 5 and phase 6 to identify impacts, group and cluster those impacts, assign them to people capable of resolving them, getting them resolved, integrating and accelerating, and then ultimately determining how much time, energy, and resources required for executing them and compiling the implementation master plan. Now, phase 6 has a second activity, and that is prepare the organization to support implementation. Remember, the whole phase is about plan and organize for implementation. So here, we need to prepare the organization to be able to receive the changes. Some may already be happening. Here, we're making a conscious attempt to open the doors and create greater readiness for the change to take place. The first task of this activity is establish infrastructures and conditions to support implementation. And so that might be trainings, it might be communications, it might be pilots, it might be tours of a proposed new facility, any of the kinds of activities that would allow people to get their fingers in, maybe their feet in to the new reality so they have a sense of what's going to be asked of them and that they're going to be supported to be successful. That's what's critical here. So frequently when we have a whole bunch of change coming at stakeholders, they're in overwhelm. And what we want to do is let them know we're thinking through how to ensure they are successful in the new state as we're implementing it. So again, trainings are really important here, or site visits might be really important here. And then ultimately, when folks are prepared and ready and expecting, then we communicate the implementation master plan and ensure that everybody who needs to know about it knows about it, understands the rationale for the resources and the timing, and we've taken into account capacity needs and how much else is happening in the organization as we roll out. No project is ever an isolated island in the organization. We are always looking to integrate with what else is happening. So here we have the execution of all of the work of impact analysis, resolving, and coming up with an implementation plan. And at the conclusion of phase 6, communicating how it's going to go in terms of the delivery, the execution of implementation, which brings us to phase 7. And so we'll get there shortly. The work of these two phases, 5 and 6, absolutely critical to the success of your effort. And note that we're getting into the details. We're getting into the operational requirements so that your implementation plan can be realistic and executed effectively. So I hope this has expanded your thinking and your approach to handling the leap from design to implementation. These phases happen in between that leap, and you have added that to your process plan. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope you gained some valuable insights for your work. Please send me your questions and challenges by going to askdrchange.com.